Hi everyone and welcome once again to Geek Fest Rants. My name is Carlos Perone and today we are continuing with part 2 of our 2012 San Diego Comic-Con coverage. Specifically, as we did on part 1, we are focusing on the big gigantic films that are coming up in the distant future and the not so distant present. Joining me again is Steve Avona, and we are going to continue where we left off last time. Not only, like I said before, with films, but we might throw in some television-related stuff here or there. So let's jump in where we left off. Expendables 2.
Oh, well.
I'm sure you're not going to see that one, right?
No, I could care less. We did a 4-part Stallone special, so, I mean, if anybody's listening out there, they know how I feel about Stallone and the first film. And this, I think, is just, there's not a heck of a lot to say except that I'm extremely excited because you have bulked up roles for Schwarzenegger and Bruce Willis. And, Van Damme is the villain. You're going to have more. From what I gather, I watched the Comic-Con panel, and I think that Stallone really kind of took to heart the criticisms that, Expendables was a big hit, but there was a lot of clunkiness about it. And I think that he heard the criticisms, and I think he's tweaked it a little. And my feeling is this is going to be bigger, better, more of the same, but better kind of a situation. It's really the last movie of the summer that I have any excitement or interest for.
Now, let me ask you a quick question, because I'm sure at some point we can delve into this deeper, but would it be possible to do a third Expendables film? Are there any big stars you can think of that have not been used?
Well, I don't know about big stars, but I know he had approached Steven Seagal to do. Stallone's philosophy with these films is using a combination of new guys and quote-unquote washed-up guys. Somebody like Van Damme, who's been in the straight-to-video world for God knows how long, or Dolph Lundgren. These are guys who have the chops, but whose careers have kind of gone in a certain direction. And he knows what they're capable of, and his career has, he hit hard times too.
He's had his ups and downs. Right. From what I understand, when he did this panel was before the tragedy that happened with his son.
Oh, with his son. Yeah, actually, it's kind of sad because I have a feeling that his son was already gone by the time he did the panel, but nobody knew about it. That was terrible.
Now, let's jump, speaking of Bruce Willis, Looper.
I don't know a ton about it except that I love Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
I saw this trailer a while back because they've been promoting the trailer for a while. The movie's coming out only in 2 months. And it seemed to be somewhat of a time travel-y film action. It a little bit reminded me of Time Cop in a way. Oh. Speaking of Van Damme.
Yeah.
With Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Bruce Willis playing basically the same character, one young, one old. But the same person. And for whatever bizarre reason, I kept looking at Levitt and it was like, he looks different. Why does he look different? And I'm like, I could not put my finger on it. Why does this guy look different than he normally looks on all the other films? And from what I understand now that I've seen a little bit about the film and I read about it, in order to make him look like Bruce Willis, I believe they changed his eye color and they gave him a prosthetic nose. And that's why he's got that Bruce Willis kind of broken nose kind of angle to it. And that kind of makes me understand a little bit why I was having such a bizarre reaction to looking at him. Like, this guy looks like almost like a lookalike of Levitt. It doesn't look like the real Levitt.
Oh, wow.
Well, the plot of the story, from what I understand, is in the future, I guess, like mobsters, the criminals, organized crime, in order to kill somebody, if they put a hit on somebody, instead of killing them there, they send them back in time to have them killed in the past. This way, there's no trace of them in the future in terms of them being caught.
Okay.
And it just happens that Levitt's character, that's his job. He's a killer that handles people from the future to be shot by him, basically, to be executed by him. Mm-hmm. And apparently, lo and behold, one day they sent him back as his older self.
Okay.
So the movie is about him, I guess, trying to figure out why they're trying to kill him and why he's supposed to kill himself.
Right.
It's an interesting little plot thing that I don't think we've seen yet in all these bizarre movies that we watch. Like I said, it had this little Time Cop vibe about it, but not a gigantic mega blockbuster type of thing, but it could be one of these films that kind of sneaks in there on you and hopefully is entertaining. And like I said, it's only coming out in 2 months, so I'm kind of interested in seeing it. And, Levitt is a big name nowadays. I mean, he's had some really important films, going back to Inception and recently, with Dark Knight Rises, he's becoming a major player.
Definitely.
Let's take a little jump over to Dredd. while we are still kind of on the comic book, staying honest to the theme of Comic-Con.
Right.
You and I both remember, well, you know the original Judge Dredd comic book, I'm sure, and I know Judge Dredd, Sylvester Stallone's Judge Dredd,
Yeah.
I Am the Law Judge Dredd.
Right.
Tell us about what you know about this remake, because it's like, wow, they're going to remake this?
Well, I think everybody, even the most diehard Stallone fan, would admit that Judge Dredd, the movie, was a disaster, and that it was a little bit, it took the premise of the comic, but it was not faithful in a way that true fans were hoping for. And the first thing that really cries out about the fact is that, very early on in the movie, Stallone took his helmet off.
Right. That's a big deal from what I understand.
Which Judge Dredd never does. And from what I understand, Carl Urban, who plays the character in this film, has sworn up and down that he does not take his helmet off. Right. And that's a big deal.
Carl Urban, who's Dr. McCoy on the last Star Trek reboot.
Last Star Trek movie, and he was also in Lord of the Rings.
That's right.
Yeah. So everything I'm hearing is that they got it right. The buzz on it is really terrific.
Apparently, they even had some kind of screening at Comic-Con that some people got to watch, and they got a pretty good reaction to it.
Yeah, the buzz on it has been terrific. And, it's one of those September releases kind of a thing. They don't want to put it up against the real big boys, which I don't blame them for.
The trailer's pretty good, too. I don't know if you've seen the trailer, but it's a very stylized trailer in terms of how they, a lot of slow motion stuff. It a little bit reminded me of John Woo a little bit.
Yeah.
It all apparently centers around this big building, which I'm told is very faithful to the comic in terms of they have to climb level by level to reach the big bad guy.
Right. And I think that's great. It's sort of a post-apocalyptic future kind of a thing. But yeah, the fact that they're keeping it just in this one location, I know it has nothing to do with it, but you mentioned John Woo, and I keep thinking about this movie that I want to see called The Raid.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to see that.
And I'm really dying to see it. And it just hearing that, Judge Dredd takes place in a building in a sort of a cramped location like that. And it just reminds me of that other film that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I'm very excited for that. And
that movie, it's funny you mentioned that. That movie reminds me of the fact that they're remaking RoboCop, and the director of RoboCop, I think it's a Brazilian director who directed a movie called Elite Squad, which is also a very high, intense cop type of film.
Yeah.
It all kind of comes back.
Yeah. But, just to finish off Dredd, I think that Carl Urban is a great choice. And what I saw of him in the trailer makes me believe he's nailed the character. And I'm really looking forward to it. I hope it's a movie that, can, generate some sequels. Putting it out in September is a smart move. It doesn't have to compete against the big boys, but that's traditionally a time when you don't see a lot of genre stuff. So maybe it'll grab some more money than it might normally.
Yeah. Speaking of which, another great segue for us. This is the type of movie that I hope is kind of like when we saw District 9, a movie that we didn't hear jack squat about, and all of a sudden it's there, and it's like, where did this come from? Why is this movie so good? Speaking of District 9, we have Elysium.
With Matt Damon.
With Matt Damon, by Neil Blomkamp, who was the director of District 9. Again, another one of these pictures that I didn't know anything about until all of a sudden Entertainment Weekly publishes a picture of Matt Damon, bald, holding this big gun.
Right.
And it's like, what the hell is this? And apparently they're trying a similar, strategy. It's a quiet film. Nobody knows much about it. It's a futuristic thing. He is apparently, accused of a crime he didn't commit type of deal. Right. And he has to escape into a colony or a different planet called Elysium. And the only thing I know about that word Elysium is I've heard that word once during Streetcar Named Desire, Elysium Fields, and I also heard it on Gladiator, which is supposed to be the place where it's like the heaven. Or paradise to the Gladiator Roman times. So I guess this is a planet that everybody is trying to get to escape whatever it is they're escaping from.
Right.
Again, we don't know much about it, but hopefully it will be one of these little quiet movies.
Well, District 9 snuck up on everybody, and it was terrific.
It was great. Django.
Oh, Quentin Tarantino.
With a D, which I always try to go, does Django? No, just Django. I remember when I was into my, let's try to catch up with all the spaghetti Western in the world, running into a whole bunch of different Django movies. And yes, this is one of the inspirational films of Tarantino as far as spaghetti Western goes. This is a remake, a reboot, because the film's been kind of made many times back in the 70s, I believe. It's funny, even on the trailer, they have the original Django on a side-by-side shot with Jamie Foxx.
Oh, really?
But yeah, that's the original Django, the older guy, the guy with the beard.
Oh,
and
okay.
from what I've seen, this is typical Tarantino. It's a Tarantino Western, basically. There's no way around it. The subject matter is a slave. The guy's a slave, which you can tell Tarantino's going to have a ball writing lines for this guy because of his background and everything. And the cast is apparently full of, big stars. DiCaprio's in it, and just about everybody and their grandmother is in this film. Samuel L. Jackson is in it,
right?
Which I guess that's his muse. That's Tarantino's muse. But it's interesting because the character of Broomhilda, which is I guess is the love interest of Django, Tarantino says her last name is Broomhilda Van Shaft, and he says it's Van Shaft because she's the great granddaughter of the character Shaft.
Oh God! Oh, that's great.
So. I don't think we're going to get disappointed with anything that comes out of Tarantino because, the guy is unbelievable how he writes. Again, non-genre. This is Western here we're talking about, but it's a big movie that's coming out later in the year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get close to wrapping this up. And I know you wanted to touch upon a couple of quick television projects that are Marvel related.
Well, yeah, superhero related.
Yeah.
The big one that I'm very excited for is Arrow, which is based on the DC character Green Arrow. And what's interesting about this show is the fact that the Smallville series that recently went off the air, which went on for 10 seasons and was about the life of young Clark Kent, featured Green Arrow as a recurring character. But in this version, this is not a sequel or a continuation in any way of the Green Arrow character that Justin Hartley played on Smallville. The actor is named Stephen Amell, and everything I'm reading and the trailers that I've watched, it's a really, really dark version of this character. And I think that fits the character more so as he is in the comic. And it, again, like we've talked about, it pulls from different storylines in the comic. And I'm really excited about it. I have a feeling that it has the potential to be sort of a crossover hit. And, they're not calling it Green Arrow. They don't, most people know it's a superhero show.
But is it more of a realistic, darker show and less of a WB 90210 type of deal?
Right. It definitely is. And you're not going to see, with the exception of from maybe 2 or 3 other characters that are, from the DC universe, you're not going to see superheroes in the sense of people with powers.
The guest of the week.
This one really, I think, has a lot of potential. And I like the tone and I like the look. I think he's, again, from what I've seen, he's really the right man for the job. I like the storylines from the comic that they're pulling from. I think those are the right ones to use. And I have a feeling that this is going to be, that has the potential to be, one of those 7-year type shows that has a lot of legs.
Mm-hmm. Well, from what I understand, Firefly also had a quick little reunion.
Yeah, that was just, we're not talking about anything new here.
No, it was just something for the fans, basically.
Yeah, I think Joss Whedon called it a victory lap. It was a 10-year reunion where they had about half the cast there and Joss Whedon, just talking about the phenomenon and how the history of it and how grateful they are to the fans. And it was just a really nice, you could tell a lot of the cast. I watched the panel. You can see how emotional they were, how these people have really bonded and become a family, and how this, phenomenon to me rivals the Star Trek phenomenon in terms of just the fan base getting together. And were it not for the fans, you would not have had the show resurrected as a feature film. And there's a part of me that believes that we haven't seen the last of it. I think that, there's a part of me that thinks that Joss Whedon could snap his fingers now and say, I want to do a Firefly movie, or I want to produce Firefly TV movies or something. And they would say, okay, Joss, whatever you say.
The money would start to flow.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's necessarily going to happen. It lives on in comics, and people in the audience mentioned, well, would you like to do an animated series? Would you like to do a radio series? Things like that. All these people would love to work together again. And I think Joss even said they were the finest cast he has ever worked with and will ever work with. So there's just a part of me that hopes that we will see more original stories, either on feature films or television, even if it was TV movies for sci-fi or something.
Right. Well, I'm sure he was probably bombarded with tons of questions about Avengers 2.
He's also mentioned that, these movies, you attach yourself to a movie like this and you see what happened to Del Toro. I mean, of course it's going to happen, but, you're definitely, at a minimum, you're throwing away 2 years of your life. So, and possibly 3.
Yeah.
So, and he's the kind of guy that likes to do his own stuff. So it'll be interesting.
Definitely. We also got to see, from what I understand, when we saw Dark Knight Rises, the new trailer for Skyfall, which they also showed at Comic-Con. And yes, we got to see a lot more than last time. It's still kind of like not enough. You want to see more. You don't get a clear picture of the bad guy, Bardem.
Right.
But it's typical Bond. It's super slick. It looks good. The story looks interesting. I mean, it's not... How many times can you kind of tell the same sort of story? That, somebody has a list of all the agents and they're going to release it. And yeah, it looks... I still like... Even though the last Bond film wasn't that great, I still like Daniel Craig.
Oh, I love him.
And I hope they can pull it off this time around.
Yeah, no, I think that they started off great with Casino Royale. Quantum of Solace, I think, was a real disaster. And now they've had all these legal problems that have delayed this movie. But now I think they know what they did wrong and they got the right director. And Craig has so much charisma in the role. My gut feeling is this is going to be a huge hit.
Yeah. Like I said, it looks really, really cool. I can't wait for that one.
Me too.
Let's wrap it up with a very appropriate director for our last film that we're going to talk about. The film is Oz the Great and Powerful.
Oh,
Sam Raimi. You're one of your favorites.
Yeah, well, I've loved Sam since the Evil Dead days, and, I'll be the first to admit I was disappointed that he was kind of kicked off Spider-Man, even though Spider-Man 3 was not good. I was hoping he would do at least one more.
Well, the film is promoted as from the director of the Spider-Man trilogy.
Well, of course, they're gonna trade on that, definitely. I saw the trailer. I watched it a couple of times. I think that there's a lot of Oz stories out there. And I'm actually a big fan of the Return to Oz that was done in the 80s.
Wow, I've never seen that one.
Oh, it's so dark and it's very, very interesting. So many people love the original film, and I don't want to take anything away from it because I actually like it too, but it's of its time and it's a musical, and there are, I don't know how many Oz books out there, and this film is going back to the Wizard, tells the story of the Wizard.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And even the style of the trailer where they started in black and white and they moved to color, it gives you that little sentimental vibe.
You have a little nod to the original film, but and yes, you're going to see characters that we've seen in the original film, but it's definitely going to be Raimi-fied, I think.
Right. Plus, it also said in the trailer, I think it also says something like from the creators of Alice in Wonderland, and it does have that modern Alice in Wonderland vibe to it too, the exaggerated characters in the obvious sets, but they're like very fantasy looking.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to be a little bit of a dark story. You're gonna have like the Wicked Witch, and all that stuff. So
it's an origin story.
Right. And I think James Franco was a good choice. It's funny, now that the Spider-Man films have been rebooted, you're hearing a lot of people come out of the woodwork saying that they didn't like them and all this other stuff. And I thought that the first 2 Spider-Man movies were brilliant. I think he's brilliant. I love his smaller films like Simple Plan. I love the Evil Dead films. I love Darkman. The guy has such a visual style, and we've talked about it endlessly with our other friends too. And I just think that he's the right guy for this world.
Well, yeah, this is right up his alley. You know, he's kind of like a Tim Burton type.
Right.
When he sticks to his genre, what he's best at, he can do some really interesting things. But then every now and then they throw us a curveball. They throw you an Ed Wood if you're Burton. They throw you a Simple Plan if you're Raimi.
Right.
And I know why the number one reason you're going to go see this film is not because of the subject matter, Oz. I think it's because they did tell us in Comic-Con that Bruce Campbell will have a cameo.
Of course. If Bruce Campbell's there, I'm there.
He's got to be one of the flying monkeys.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that wraps it up for our 2-part special on, trying to get the juiciest, meatiest part of Comic-Con out for everybody.
Yeah.
I'd like to thank Steve for joining us and everyone for listening, and we'll see you here next time on Geek Fest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Jenny was sweet. She was stop.